My mother wanted to throw me away when she found out I was born with Down syndrome, so I was raised by my grandparents. Years later, when I overcame my disability, she came back to ask for support. My mother got pregnant when she was a teenager. She was a very hyperactive addict and was impossible to control for my grandparents, especially considering their own problems. My grandma was in a wheelchair, and my grandpa worked at a factory for 70 hours a week. As soon as I was born, my mother wanted to give me away to what she called a freak's home. My grandma refused, so my mother went as far as to call the police and claim my grandma was kidnapping me. Thankfully, when the cops arrived, my mother slipped up and told them she wanted to throw me away, and so they didn't snatch me from my grandma. When everything else failed, my mother said, "It's either me or him." So even though my grandparents begged her not to, she left the house and disappeared. Growing up with my grandparents was challenging. Although I considered them my real parents, I threw so many tantrums. I would refuse to eat food if the salt was a little too much, throw my diaper around like a towel, and turn the volume on the TV to max out of nowhere. My grandmother couldn't chase me around since she was in a wheelchair, but she still did her best to raise me. Thankfully, my grandpa was able to get a better job when I turned 5, and they never gave up on me. They sent me to a special school where I was able to learn how to live with my condition. My grades were still terrible, and I graduated high school with the minimum marks possible. Regardless, I was happy because my grandparents loved me so much, and it was the best living with them. They did tell me about my mother when I turned 16, and at first I wanted to find her because I was so angry. But then I calmed down and realized that she was never a part of my life, so I kept calling my grandma as my mom. Anyway, instead of going to college, I started streaming and began a YouTube channel, which blew up. At first it was simply me getting bullied by my viewers for not being normal, but then people started noticing how I was actually pretty fun to talk to. They started asking me questions about how it was like growing up with Down syndrome, so I started making TikToks. I would do weird dances and keep it lighthearted. My viewers went from bullying me to supporting me and even pushing me to get a girlfriend. I didn't do that, but instead I did get a ton of real-life friends. I introduced them to my grandparents, and they broke down crying because it was the first time I had actual friends who cared about me. It was a really embarrassing moment. I thought nothing in my life could go wrong anymore, but that's exactly when my mother showed up. One random day, I noticed a woman was ringing our doorbell. She looked like a usual junkie, and her hair was all messed up. I opened the door and asked what she wanted. She called me by name and said she was here to be a mother to me. I didn't believe her at first, but then she was recognized by my grandparents, who invited her in. I told them to not talk to her, but they didn't listen and said she was their daughter. I kept talking about how she abandoned me and had a huge episode where I refused to listen to anyone, especially this woman who claimed to be my mother. I ran away to stay at a friend's house while my grandparents talked with her. A few hours later, they called me and asked me to just speak with her once to see if she really wanted to make things right and to give her a chance. I agreed, but on the condition that she wouldn't stay in our house. Not even 10 minutes into our conversation, my mother mentioned watching my YouTube channel and how proud she was of my success. Then she wasted no time in asking for money. She said she had some credit card debt and needed some additional funds for activities. She said, "Of course you'll support your mommy, right? I did so much for you and brought you into this world." I asked what she meant by doing so much for me. She went on a narcissistic rant about not being able to drink alcohol or smoke while she was pregnant with me and blamed me for getting dumped by her boyfriend. I realized then that this woman felt absolutely zero remorse and left while calling her insufferable. When I got home, I convinced my grandparents to move into a new house with the money I was making. I did this because my mother knew our current address and kept showing up with demands. On the last day, she saw that the house was empty, and I was waiting in an Uber outside to say goodbye. Before she could lash out, I threw a single penny at her and said, "Here's some money to help out with the activities."